I'm John Nash, professor of literature from Erie Community College in Buffalo, New York. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing James Allan Mattei, author of an extraordinary trilogy, The Call. You can read samples of The Call. I have a list here. On Amazon.com, Borders.com, JAMPublications.com, Booksurge.com, AbeBooks.com, and Alibris.com. A couple of friends of mine told me in the past about how they regretted finishing James Michener's Hawaii. They were sorry when they put the book down. Well, I recently have reread the 1,100 plus pages of Jim Mattei's The Call, the trilogy, and I regretted when I put it down. I was sorry that it ended. I'm looking forward to talking to Mr. Mattei to find out if there's going to be anything further. With no further ado, I call upon you, Jim Mattei. Come on in here, and with pleasure I introduce you to our audience.
Thank you for inviting me, John.
Welcome, Jim. Welcome. Well, the title of your trilogy, The Call. Tell me about that word. What is The Call, and what is the significance of that title?
The call is a thin membrane, an amniotic sac that completely envelops, covers a child at birth. The doctor has to cut through the sac to remove the baby from it. And the baby does not need to be bathed, it's completely clean. This call protects that child from all sorts of disease. Now, the legend holds that such a call, and it used to be preserved and sold to ship's captains, because the legend held that if a captain had this on a ship, it would protect their vessel from maritime disaster at sea. It was also believed that such a child had a special destiny and would be protected until the destiny was fulfilled. In addition, some also believed that such a child might be clairvoyant. But when you put all those things together, it makes for a fascinating beginning of a novel for the protagonist.
Yeah.
And this particular trilogy, The Call follows the protagonist throughout the trilogy and his life.
Now, why did you choose that? Where did you get the idea of that for your title?
I was born with a call during the Great Depression in Brooklyn, New York. And
is that to say that this is autobiography?
Well, it's based on my experiences, and it's my experiences that have given me the ideas for the writing of the novel. Well, even though the novel is fiction, but all good novels will make the reader wonder whether it really happened.
You did serve in the military. You were in the OSI, and that stands for what?
Office of Special Investigations, United States Air Force.
You were also Special Agent CID?
That's Criminal Investigation Division, Department of the Army.
I imagine much of this book is derived from that.
Oh yes, a lot of it is.
Now, before you got into fiction, which is what The Call is, you were a writer of textbooks, weren't you? Forensic psychophysiology. What is that?
Lie detection.
I see.
Polygraph. The forensic psychophysiology is the official term of the discipline as adopted by the American Society for Testing of Materials, formerly known as ASTM. So the official designation is forensic psychophysiology, but in effect it's lie detection using the polygraph instrument and truth verification.
Yeah. I've read some of your nonfiction, some of your textbooks, some of your scholarly articles on that. I confess not all. I have read all of your call. I have read all that. Now, what do you prefer?
Fiction, definitely. Fiction, it enables me to exercise all my creative abilities.
Mm-hmm.
It's only another author or composer really knows the agony and the ecstasy of working or of performing a work of art.
Agony. Can you expand on that? Agony, ecstasy. What?
Well, unless you're writing a comedy, most novelists, I would assume, experience the emotions that the protagonists and the characters in their story. For I certainly thoroughly experienced the heights of ecstasy and the depths of despair of my characters as I describe their behavior and their feelings, which I visualize as a movie that's developing with dialogue and sound, which, when completed, I reduced to writing.
Is there much revision in James Allan Matei's fiction style?
No, in my particular case, no, because I'd like to explain what happens. I just recently had a conversation with Cleve Baxter, who's the author of a book called Primary Perception, Biocommunication with Plants, Living Foods, and Human Cells. And he told me, he says, Jim, he says, you're channeling. I said, what do you mean? So what you're doing, he says, you're sticking your antenna up there. He says, and all of these ideas, also, they're just given to you by some spiritual being up there. He says, because you're seeing this as a movie, and he's absolutely right. I'm lying in bed, or I'm doing nothing, and all of a sudden this scene comes up, and then I see this as a movie developing, and it just develops and develops. And then when it's sufficiently developed, then I sit on a computer and I just use my command of the English and French language, I do use some French in there, to describe what I see and hear, the dialogue, which is almost complete. And I just write it. So therefore, there are just so many ways that I can write it. So if there's any revision, it would be regarding errors that have been made in grammar, spelling, punctuation, that sort of thing. But as far as revising the text or the plot, no, not at all.
Now, obviously, this is entertaining. There's entertainment value in the call. What else is there?
Well, it's very informative. I mean, when you consider that it covers 7 decades and 3 wars, which I've experienced. It takes the reader from New York City to Montreal, Canada, back to New York, to Arizona, to England, to France, Germany, Luxembourg, Italy, Spain, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Far East, such as South Korea, and other distant lands, where the protagonist, as a special agent, for instance, encounters a lot of struggles and challenges, and in that, the reader is going to benefit from authentic forensic practices that I've learned in the process.
Very good. Now, what's your style of writing, would you say? Which writers have been the key influence on James Allan Matei?
You know, other than reading many years ago the Paris Review interviews, writers at work, several volumes, which describes in maybe 15, 20 pages the style of each writer. These are the famous writers, like Ernest Hemingway and Scott Fitzgerald and Thomas Wolfe and several others.
Poets too.
I haven't read any fiction novels, in other words, of fiction, for the past 30, 35 years. Most likely because I've been so busy doing research for the textbooks. I've been involved in a lot of research regarding, I've got 3 textbooks and a supplement that are out there already, so. And besides that, I really don't want other writers' styles to influence my style. I want to find my own literary voice.
Yeah. You're kind of a nature boy writer. By that I mean you're not looking to models. You're not really deeply interested in revision, would you say?
No, I'm not. And one of the reasons is that if you're really writing a trilogy, when I already knew after book 1 what book 2 is going to be about, and I knew what book 3 was going to be about. And so why should I stop when book 2 is begging to be told? Should I stop to go and revise book 1? It's been told. I'm anxious to get to book 2, then to book 3, and now I've done book 4, which has been completed, and I'm working on book 5. So I really don't have the time nor the inclination to devote much in rewriting a work that I feel is completed.
That's interesting, because I happen to know that one of your heroes is Max Perkins, which would seem to me to be going contrary to your practice. You admire Max Perkins, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
He, his 3 literary sons were Ernest Hemingway and Scott Fitzgerald and Thomas Wolfe. He had all 3 of those authors in his stable. But I read recently in the Authors Guild, their bulletin, where one of the authors of an article stated that they felt that these 3 individual authors would not have become such literary giants without the doting oversight of Max Perkins, their editor, whose pen affected almost every word of their manuscript. But nevertheless, I don't have any quarrel with the intense editing process, as long as it doesn't have an impact on my manner of describing my characters and their emotions.
Yeah, you do have your work edited. You don't revise it heavily yourself.
No, it's edited only for the purpose of making sure there's no errors in grammar, spelling, and punctuation.
Once again, evidence that a great work is never completed, but merely abandoned. Maybe I shouldn't say merely.
I agree with that.
Well, now, what do you think built your confidence as a writer?
That's a good question. Because back in the mid-70s, actually around 1975, I was encouraged by my university mentor, to write a textbook on polygraph, because he had learned from me that the existing textbooks, and there were 2 of them at the time, were dated. They did not include some of the later techniques, polygraph techniques, and so I felt it was needed in the field, and so I started writing it. Even though I had no credentials, I didn't have, I'd never written a book before, let alone a textbook of scientific work. But I felt confident enough that once a publisher would review it, that he would see the merits of it. And so, about 10 chapters into it, in a couple of years, I'd already I decided there would be about 29 chapters. I'd already filled out the outline. I started sending query letters to all the various publishers, including those that had published books of that nature in the past. And I got nothing but rejections, stating very politely, this is not a reflection on your work, but it's too specialized a field for us. But one of the major publishers that had published some books about it before had stated that my book was too large. Well, I kept that in mind as I continued writing. And then when I finished it, I had reduced it to 19 chapters. but I had no takers. In other words, I had no place to go with the manuscript. And I was introduced to an author who worked at the United Nations, who had written several textbooks. One, he was currently under contract with a prestigious university to write a book on terrorism. And he looked at my manuscript, which was typed on an IBM typewriter in that time, in the 70s, and he says, oh, well, it's nicely typed. He says, but your table of contents is all wrong. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, it says they're one-liners. Chapter 6, a silent answer test. Chapter 7, so and so. He says, under that one-line description, you've got to put a paragraph on it that's summarizing the contents of that chapter. And he pulls out a couple of his books and he shows me that. And so I was convinced that that's the way to go. And he says, I'll put a good word in my editor. But when I contacted the editor, he recited the same song. It's too specialized a field for that. But anyway, so I spent my entire vacation changing a one-page table of contents to several pages. And finally, out of desperation, I called this publisher, the editor-in-chief of the publisher that stated that my book was too large. And I said to him, I've finished the book, and I've paid attention to your comments, and I've reduced it from 29 chapters down to 19 chapters. He said, well, by all means, send it to us and we'll review it. About 2 weeks later, I received a letter with a contract accepting the book for publication. But the thing that surprised me the most was when I received the galleys, the proofs for that book, they had not changed a single word in the text. However, the table of contents, they made them all back to one-liners. They deleted all of the sub-paragraphs which had worked so hard in my vacation to
Is there a moral to that story, James?
follow your instincts.
Oh, okay.
And I subsequently had other events that have occurred that have confirmed that. Follow your instincts.
Well, one of your instincts has been to make the great leap from nonfiction to fiction. How is that? How do you like that?
I love working with fiction. It's my first love now. Nonfiction is going to take a back step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fiction. As I mentioned earlier, it allows me to exercise all my creativity.
Maybe that Eddie Murphy anecdote you were telling me about recently would fit in at this point. You want to share it?
Yes, about a couple of weeks ago, I saw a program on TV where Eddie Murphy was on stage being interviewed before a group of student actors. And one of the student actors asked him if he paid any attention, if he ever read any of the negative reviews on his performances. And he says, not at all. He says, I don't like to, he didn't like to read any negative comments. He says it wasn't productive, and besides that, he'd learned to follow his instincts. And he gave an example that when he was first starting out as a comedian, and he was on the same stage with Rodney Dangerfield. And so Roger Dangerfield, after watching his act, told him to criticize his performance, saying that you should have done this, done that, and I did this. And so Eddie Murphy just listened to him attentively, but nevertheless didn't change his act and followed his own instincts. Well, many years later, Eddie Murphy is now a big star, and he's performing at one of the, it may have been a casino in Las Vegas, I don't remember. But he goes into the restroom, and there's Rodney Dangerfield in the restroom. Dangerfield turns around, takes one look at Eddie Murphy, and he says, "Who knew? Who knew?" And the message is, follow your instincts. But,
each to his own taste.
Chacun à son goût, yes. As they say in
That's
French.
French, you know.
Yes.
Okay, very good. James, will there be a part 4?
Yes, indeed.
There will be a part 4.
It's completed.
Ah.
It's already completed. In fact,
Congratulations.
the editing process ended yesterday.
Very good, very good. Okay.
But it will not be released until parts 1, 2, and 3 have been digested by the public.
You looking in the future to a 5?
I'm already working on 5.
Oh my goodness. Very good. Well, we can see the cover of part 1 of this trilogy, and it's got an interesting cover. Teach me about this cover, James.
First of all, this book is not the normal 6x9. This is a 7x10. So it's a larger book. And it's 360 pages, but the pages contain a larger, and the font is 11 font. So it contains a lot more text on each page than you would find in the 6x9. So if this were a 6x9 with the regular size fonts, this book would probably be in the neighborhood of 600 to 700 pages.
You're getting more for the money.
Yes.
What do you have to say about that ship there?
This is a cutter rig sailboat built.
Is that yours?
I wish. I can't afford it. It's a 41-foot cutter rig sailboat built by Ted Gossard in Goodrich, Ontario, Canada. There's a 6-foot bowsprit, which is that part right in front there, which makes it 47 feet. They took the pictures on Lake Huron, and so each book has a different side of it, of a different photo of that same vessel. So you have book 1, you have part 1, you have part 2 over here. Part 1 is Born with a Mission, part 2 is Truth and Deception, and part 3 is Good versus Evil.
Okay. Now, the 3 books right here are available. You can get them online. I have a list here. Amazon.com, Borders.com, JAMPublications.com, Booksurge.com, abooks.com, and alibris.com. What if viewers are interested in getting a peek in the book, reading a taste? Is that possible?
Yes, it is. All you have to do is to go on Amazon.com and click on books, and then when you get the window for the search window, type in The Call, a trilogy, and then it will bring them into the 3 books, and part 1, part 2, part 3. They could click on, for instance, part 1, and then it will expand to a whole page, and then it will say, you know, search or read inside the book, and then you just click on that, and then you can go and read inside the book. It also gives you statistics on comparing this book with other books, such as readability, etc., word count, and all that. It also has book reviews listed there that you can read as well.
Some of the book reviews were outstanding, I thought, by the way. Is your book available in both soft and hardcover?
Yes, it is.
Aha. Okay.
But the soft cover is available within, like, say, 48 hours. It's print on demand. As you know, in other words, as you order the book, it's printed, and within 48 hours it's available. With the hardcover, because there's a glue process, it takes longer.
Gotcha. Audiobooks.
That's been around, but right now I think it's growing by leaps and bounds. I believe that Amazon just acquired a audiobook company.
Now, what about The Call? Will it find its way to audio?
Yeah, I'm looking for that now. Hopefully, within a year, I'll have it on audio.
And it would be on CD, probably on CD.
DVD.
Oh, really?
Probably DVD, yeah, because of the
size.
The size of it, yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing your characters when they are transferred to the DVD, the digital format. But is an exciting prospect indeed. I'm glad that you've taken the time to come here for this interview, and I'm looking forward to a second interview, Jim, after I've read part 5, whenever that's released.
How about part 4? You haven't read that either.
Well, you're right, I haven't, but I've read parts 1, 2, and 3 twice.
Yes.
Until then, Jim, I want to sincerely thank you. Thanks for coming in and letting me have at you today. And I wish you good luck.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.